What a year of weather it's been here in Indiana. Every year is a little crazy, and this year was no different, especially with severe weather. We had a lot of it, and we had a lot of tornadoes, a lot of hail, and many wind reports across the state. But it's not just severe weather, but also wintry weather, the cloudy weather, the windy weather. We had a lot of wind this year. They don't call it Windiana for nothing. But that all came together to give us our 2024. So we wanted to take a moment and go over the top 10 weather stories that happened this year across the whole state. Now, when you think of crazy weather, your first thought may be tornadoes, and we had a lot of those. So instead of just this list to be used to mention tornadoes, we picked a couple notable ones that created the most damage. But before we get to the biggest tornadoes in that list, we wanted to go over some of the general tornado stats that we got this year because unfortunately they were pretty impressive. We don't want them to be impressive. On average, we get 28 tornadoes a year. This year, we had 57 tornadoes as of December 15th. Put all those together, we had $37 million in property damage and $43,000 in crop damage. This is a map of all those tornadoes that took place this year. We had 12 in northern Indiana, 15 across central Indiana. Southeastern Indiana, we had 10, and southwestern Indiana, we had 20. So altogether, you get the 57. Now, let's chat some hail. We had a lot of it. SPC, Storm Prediction Center, recorded 91 reports of severe hail or hail damage. So you usually have to have at least 1 inch size hail in order to do that in diameter. But there were 16 reports across the state where you had 2-inch plus hail. That's somewhere between the size of a golf ball and a tennis ball. Then for wind, we had 378 high wind damage reports. However, many of those were not just due to thunderstorms, although most of them were, but a lot of them were due to tropical systems, which we'll get into. So it was a busy year. If you wanted to, you could go to our website. We've got a list of those tornado reports from across the state. And the National Weather Service has put together how each tornado tracked and how much damage to produce, of course, along with its EF rating. But now I made you wait long enough. Let's get into the top 10 biggest weather stories for 2024 for all Hoosiers across the state. Now, quick catch. We're going to cheat a little because we're not ranking them from the biggest to the baddest to the worst or not so bad. We're simply just going chronologically. We picked the top 10 biggest weather stories, but we're going to go through them chronologically through the year from January to December. So up first, January. In January and for the entire winter, we're in our cloudy season. You know, December, January, February, March, it's overcast. However, January 2024 was notable because we just looked at the data from the noon hour every single day. And January 2024 was the 5th cloudiest month we've ever had on record in Indianapolis. We've had some really warm lake waters over the Great Lakes, especially Lake Michigan. And we still had some of those stiff northwest winds and those cold air outbreaks during the month of January. So because the waters were so warm, even though we weren't getting maybe lake effects all the time, we were getting a lot of lake effect clouds. And we were locked in with those overcast skies. The other cloudiest months were recorded January 1999, January 1998, 1992, and 1985. So it was the cloudiest month we've had for the 21st century so far. It was very gray. We needed some sun desperately, and we would get some in the summer for sure. February, moving on to the second month after a pretty big snow drought for much of the winter. It was not a very good snow season for us. We finally got a good blast there on February 16th. 3.9 inches of snow fell over Indianapolis. Here's the map across the state. You see how much we picked up for most Hoosiers. Now, 3.9 inches may not sound like a lot, and really in perspective, it isn't. But we only had 8.2 inches for the whole season. So we got almost half of it just in that one day, and it caused a lot of traffic problems, especially around Indianapolis right during the rush hour. We had some huge, big, wet snowflakes that came down and made the road slicks. There were several traffic delays and accidents just everywhere. It took folks an hour or two just in order to get home. And then after that, we had some colder air for a few days, and we were able to hold that snow for a while. But for most of us, that may be kind of really the big snow that we remember for that whole snow season, because it really wasn't that impressive. Then we moved to March. We started slowly trading wintry weather for more severe weather. And the biggest, most impactful tornado that we had was the one in Randolph County. Winchester got hit with an EF3 tornado. That tornado alone caused $25 million worth of damage in the city of Winchester. That thing just ripped through the south side. It swept past the Army National Guard Armory there on Huntsville Road, and then it pushed east right over Salt Creek and right towards the Goodwill, Taco Bell, and the Walmart there right off of US Highway 27. There was one fatality with this storm. In addition, that evening we had a lot of severe weather, but there was another tornado, an EF2 tornado that touched down just to the west of there. They're on the east side of Muncie and pushed towards Selma. That tornado had top wind speeds of 120 miles per hour and caused $4 million worth of damage. The governor of Indiana, Governor Holcomb, signed an executive order declaring both Delaware and Randolph counties disaster zones. For April, we're getting out of the atmosphere and we're headed into outer space. April was the month of the Great American Total Solar Eclipse, and central Indiana was dead center in the path. We had so many folks from across the Midwest and the country and even from the world right here in Indiana to just watch the celestial display. Now, the forecast was really important. We were talking about it 10 days in advance because we needed the sky to be clear. And as we were getting closer to April 8th, we were noticing that there was a little bit more jet stream activity to help produce a few more heightened cirrus clouds. And then the question became, were those cirrus clouds going to be thick enough to block the solar eclipse or not? Or maybe possibly just mute it a little bit? Now, they were a little bit thicker later in the day, right towards sunset, but during the eclipse, it didn't matter. There were a couple streaks of some cirrus clouds, but we were able to see the total solar eclipse in its full detail. It was spectacular. In fact, we had some of the best weather across the whole country for the viewing of the total solar eclipse. It was a big success. Now, during the total solar eclipse, you remember, it was super interesting. It got a little cooler right there during totality when everything just turned dark. Many locations across the state dropped by a few degrees as we cooled off a little bit there very quickly. And then, of course, once the sun came back out, we warmed things right back up. Speaking of warming up, we headed into the month of May. And in the month of May, we had a lot of scattered showers and thunderstorm chances. But the biggest event was also in the sky. In outer space, we had a G5 geomagnetic storm, the highest on the scale. It hit Earth and we had a brilliant display of northern lights. There are only a few little clouds here and there, so across Indiana, most of us got a front row seat to the Aurora Borealis, and it was vibrant to the point where some folks didn't even need their camera in order to at least faintly see it there in the northern sky. And if you really want to see it, of course, you had to put your phone up, your camera, DSLR, put on that long exposure. But we had a lot of pinks and greens and reds. And for many folks, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see the northern lights. You didn't have to go north to Alaska or Canada. They came right to us. Now, for this year, 2024, we've been in a peak for solar activity. The sun is on roughly an 11-year cycle where we are at the peak right now for 2024. And for the next few years, we'll start to see that decrease in solar activity. So generally what we're saying is the chance of seeing northern lights is now going down. We had a great 2024. It's been the peak, but there's still chances, but we're definitely on the downhill slide for activity. So remember, there were a couple other instances of northern lights throughout the year. We kind of had these several nights throughout the year, but there was nothing like May 10th. Then we had June. June came and we're going to bring things back to our own atmosphere. Now, for the month of June, we had a lot of sun. In fact, maybe a little too much sun. In fact, there was a flash drought issued across Indiana. We were super dry throughout the rest of the summer, and it was so hot and dry this summer. We had downpours that temporarily gave some relief to some Hoosiers at times, but they were very hit or miss. Some of us got luckier than others. And one thing that your WTHR weather team had to just do just about every day was update the county burn zone maps. Those are those individual counties where they said you no longer have open flame, so we would highlight them in a red color. And sometimes you get a downpour to eliminate it, and then it can come back. So we're constantly updating those for the entire state. Now, until we were able to get some rain, we had those burn bans for several months in a row. July, the drought continued across Indiana, but there were some intense thunderstorms and multiple tornadoes throughout the month of July across the whole state. We had July 9th, mainly for southern Indiana, July 15th, especially in northern and northwestern Indiana, and then the night of July 29th into the 30th, that one kept central Indiana awake. One of the bigger tornadoes that came from those groups of thunderstorms was a supercell that actually formed in far eastern Hamilton County, Started off with an EF0 tornado, and then it just got stronger. As it crossed Indiana Route 13 in Madison County, it grew into an EF1 tornado and then eventually an EF2 tornado. This was the storm that ripped the roof off the gymnasium at the Frankton Lapel School campus, home of the Bulldogs, and threw the roof 150 yards to the north-northeast, and then some of the walls collapsed inward. And there, of course, there was a lot of significant brick wall damage there at the administration building. On top of that, there were just a lot of thunderstorms that night with a lot of wind across the state, and we had several downed trees to wake up to the next morning. Now we skip to the month of September. We were really needing some rain, and sometimes the only way to at least get a few scattered showers around here during the late summer months is to get some sort of tropical system forming in the Gulf that can push far enough north and have the just right trajectory to come to Indiana to give us some rain. Now, we were in the cone, you guys remember, for a couple different storms, but the big one, we were in the cone for Hurricane Helene, one of the most disastrous hurricanes that we've had in recent memory, mainly thanks to the flooding that took place in the mountains of western North Carolina and washed out the interstates, cut off folks from any sort of electricity or telecommunications for several weeks. Now, this storm pushed north up the Appalachians, and it took a hard left-hand turn to the west near the Ohio River and pushed into central Indiana. Because we had this slingshot effect where it just took that left-hand turn and the eye was just south of Indy, we had a lot of wind right here in central Indiana. These are some of the highest wind reports that we got across the state. For example, 68-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Indianapolis and 65-mile-per-hour wind gusts in McCordsville. It was intense, and we had a lot of power outages. And for several of us, and in fact, really for Marion County, we were without power for a handful of days. A lot of the counties outside of Marion County, outside of Indianapolis, had some power outages as well, but we're able to kind of get those up and running just a little bit faster, just with the dense population there in Marion County. It took days. And then we got healthy rain. That's what we needed. We didn't need the wind, but the wind was the main story. In fact, it was one of the windiest tropical systems Hoosiers have ever had to deal with this far north. Now we move to the month of October. In the month of October, we take you back again to outer space. The weather itself was kind of on the quieter side, but we had another geomagnetic storm. It was a G4 storm, so just slightly weaker than the one in May, that hit Earth and produced more northern lights. Most counties in Indiana were able to see it, but generally the best photos and the best viewing opportunities were north of I-70. We got a lot of cool photos in north central Indiana with the clear skies and northern lights in the background. It was beautiful. 2024 was a pretty cool year for northern lights overall, and that we'll definitely remember. All right, November. As we turn the corner closer to winter, November actually gave us a pretty good blast of snow to start the season. It may not sound like a lot, but there in November, we got 3.2 inches in one sitting. That fell in Indianapolis. This is a map of the snowfall reports that we received from across the state. After that snow, we got a lot of other little traces of snows and a half inch here and there. So by December 3rd, this is a cool stat, we actually had the snowiest start to the snow season in 35 years with that 3.8 inches total. Now, for the rest of the month, we didn't get a lot of snow heading really into December, so that stat eventually died off. But not a bad start to the snowy season, especially definitely a stronger start than the last year. So that's a look at our top 10 weather events across central Indiana. Sometimes it can get hard because each storm impacts folks in a different way to different severity levels. So let us know what some of your biggest weather memories were for 2024. It was a busy year, and most likely 2025 is going to be another busy one. But that's what we get for living here right in Indiana. No matter what the weather decides to throw at us, your WTHR weather team will be ready. We'll see you next year.